Storing survival supplies in your garage could be putting your family at risk, and you might not even know it. Stick around because I'm revealing the 9 items that could turn your emergency plan into a deadly mistake. Hey everyone! After diving deep into expert prep guides, real life crisis reports, and even talking to long term preppers, I found something shocking. Many of us are storing our emergency supplies in the worst possible place, our garage. In this video, I'm breaking down the 9 survival items you should never keep in your garage, including things most people wouldn't even think twice about. Some of these can spoil quietly, go up in flames, or become completely useless when you need them most. This isn't just about organization. It's about safety, saving money, and staying calm during supply shortages, price hikes, or blackouts. Quick question before we start. Have you noticed any weird smells, pests, or even rising costs making you rethink how and where you store your essentials? Let's talk about one of the most common and most dangerous mistakes people make when prepping. Number 1, storing canned food in the garage. Yep, that big stack of beans, tuna, and soup cans might look organized next to your gardening tools or Christmas lights, but here's the truth. Your garage is basically a ticking time bomb for your food supply. You see, garages are not climate controlled. One day it's freezing cold, the next it's hotter than your oven on bake. These wild temperature swings do more than just mess with your car battery, they mess with your food. Canned goods have a shelf life, sure, but that shelf life gets cut short fast if they're sitting in a place where it's 95 degrees one day and 40 the next. Now, let's talk about moisture. Garages tend to be damp, especially if you live in an area with high humidity. That little bit of condensation inside the can. It might not look like much, but it's enough to start rusting those metal lids. And once rust sets in, bacteria can follow. Ever heard of botulism? Yeah, it's no joke. That toxin can grow in low-acid foods stored improperly. And it can be deadly. But wait, there's more. Your garage isn't just a bad environment for cans. It's also a 5-star buffet for pests, mice, rats, bugs. They all love the smell of free food tucked away behind your lawnmower. And guess what? They don't need a key to get in, a tiny hole in a bag of rice, or a slightly dented can. That's all they need. Once they're in, they leave droppings, chew through packaging, and worse, contaminate everything else around them. Item number 2, medications. You probably never thought storing your medication in the garage could be dangerous, but trust me, it's a bigger risk than you realize. That bottle of allergy pills or pain relievers might seem safe tucked away on a high shelf, but if it's in your garage, it might not be doing you any good when you really need it. Medications are sensitive, and I mean really sensitive. Most come with labels that say things like store at room temperature or keep below 77 degrees. But let's be real. Your garage isn't exactly known for being cool and consistent. One minute it's freezing cold during a winter storm, the next it's hotter than a sauna in July. Those wild temperature swings can actually break down the active ingredients in your meds, making them less effective or even completely useless. And then there's moisture. If you've ever opened a pill bottle only to find a little packet labeled "do not eat," that's a desiccant. It's there to absorb moisture. But if your garage gets humid, and most do, that packet doesn't stand a chance. Once moisture gets into the bottle, you start seeing things like clumping, discoloration, or even strange smells, none of which are good signs when it comes to medicine. Now imagine this, you're in the middle of a crisis, maybe a blackout, a storm, or a supply shortage, and you reach for your emergency stash of blood pressure meds or insulin only to realize they've degraded because they were stored wrong. That's not just inconvenient, it's dangerous, and honestly, it's avoidable. This isn't just about expired meds either. Even brand new prescriptions can lose potency if they're stored in the wrong place for too long. So if you're trying to save space by stashing meds in the garage, you might actually be throwing money away because ineffective medication is basically a waste of cash. The fix: keep your medications inside your home where the temperature and humidity are more stable. A bathroom cabinet might seem like an obvious choice, but if it's steamy from hot showers, that's not great either. Try a bedroom drawer, a kitchen cabinet away from the stove, or even a small storage box under your bed. Just somewhere dry, cool, and out of reach of kids or pets. Pro tip: store medications indoors where the climate is stable, and always check expiration dates regularly, especially after extreme weather events. Item number 3, water containers, jugs. Okay, so you've stocked up on cases of bottled water or filled up those big 5-gallon jugs. Smart move. Water is one of the most essential things to have during a crisis. But if those containers are sitting in your garage, you might be setting yourself up for a really nasty surprise. Let's start with the basics. Water doesn't last forever, especially not in less than ideal conditions. Plastic jugs can degrade over time, especially when exposed to heat and sunlight, both of which are common in a garage. And once that plastic starts breaking down, it can leach chemicals into the water. Not exactly what you want when you're trying to stay safe and hydrated, but that's not even the worst part. Have you ever opened a jug of water that's been sitting too long and noticed a weird smell? Or maybe it tasted off? That's usually a sign of algae or bacteria starting to grow inside. Even a tiny bit of sunlight or a speck of dust can turn your emergency water stash into a petri dish. And once that happens, it's game over. You can't just boil it or filter it easily if it's already in sealed jugs. And let's talk about storage conditions for a second. Garages tend to be damp, especially in certain seasons or climates. That moisture can cause condensation inside the lids or seams of your containers, and that's all it takes for mold or mildew to start forming. Imagine reaching for your emergency water supply only to find green stuff growing inside. Gross, right? Another issue? Leaks. Those big jugs aren't as sturdy as they look, especially after months of sitting on a concrete floor or leaning against a wall. A small crack or faulty lid seal can lead to slow leaks, and before you know it, you've lost half your supply without even realizing it until it's too late. And here's something most people don't think about. Rodents. Yeah, mice and rats love chewing through plastic. If your water jugs are near other food supplies or stored close to the ground, you might come back to find little teeth marks in them. Once punctured, they're no good for long-term storage anymore. Item number 4, fuel, gasoline. All right, let's talk about something that sounds like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many people get this wrong. Storing fuel or gasoline in your garage might seem like a smart way to keep it out of the way, but trust me, it could end up being one of the most dangerous decisions you make during a crisis. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's just a few gallons for my generator or lawnmower. What's the big deal? But here's the thing. Gasoline is volatile. And when stored in a hot, enclosed space like a garage, it becomes a ticking fire hazard. But let me break it down. Gasoline gives off vapors, invisible flammable vapors that can build up over time, especially if your garage isn't well ventilated, and all it takes is one tiny spark, yes, even from flipping on a light switch, to ignite those fumes. Boom. That's not just bad news for your car, that's bad news for your entire house. And here's another scary fact. Many people don't realize that storing large amounts of gasoline in a residential garage is actually illegal in some areas. Local fire codes often restrict the amount of flammable liquids you can keep on your property. And violating those rules can lead to fines or worse, insurance issues after an accident. But it's not just about fire risks. Gasoline doesn't last forever either. Over time, it breaks down and loses its potency. After about 3 to 6 months, it starts to degrade, forming gums and varnishes that can clog up engines and cause serious damage. So if you're planning to store fuel for emergencies, you'll need to rotate your supply regularly, which is tough to do if it's buried under old Christmas decorations and paint cans. Oh, and speaking of paint, never store gasoline near other chemicals, cleaning supplies, or anything that produces heat. The risk of chemical reactions or accidental ignition is real, and garages are full of potential threats. Item number 5, important documents. Let's take a quick break from flammable stuff and talk about something a lot of us don't think twice about storing in the garage, our important documents. Yeah, I said it. That box of birth certificates, insurance policies, tax records, or even your will. If it's tucked away on a shelf in your garage, you might be risking more than you realize. Now, I get it. We all want to free up space inside the house, and the garage seems like a safe, out-of-the-way spot. But here's the problem. Garages are not safe for paper. They're full of moisture, temperature swings, pests, and worst of all, flooding risks. One small leak or a burst pipe can turn your legal life into a soggy mess in minutes. Think about this. Humidity is the enemy of paper. In most garages, especially in certain climates, the air gets damp, really damp. That moisture can cause documents to warp, stick together, or worse, grow mold. Imagine needing your driver's license during an emergency only to pull it out and find it covered in fuzzy green spots. Not exactly confidence-inspiring, and let's not forget about bugs and rodents. Termites love paper. Mice love chewing on it, and once they start nesting in that box of old paperwork, you're looking at partial pages, missing info, and maybe even complete identity chaos if sensitive documents get destroyed. But here's the kicker. Fire. If your garage ever catches fire, and many do, especially with fuel or electrical tools stored nearby, those documents are gone. Poof! No backups, no digital copies, just ashes. And getting replacements for things like social security cards, property deeds, or passports isn't as easy as running to the store. It takes time, money, and stress, especially during a crisis. Item number 6, electronics/gadgets. All right, let's talk about something a lot of people overlook when prepping. They're gadgets. You know, that emergency radio, backup flashlight, old laptop, or even your spare phone charger. If you've stashed these in the garage thinking they're safe and out of the way, I've got some bad news for you. Electronics and garages don't mix. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's just sitting on a shelf. What could possibly go wrong? But here's the thing. Electronics are super sensitive to the kind of conditions garages are known for, like dust, moisture, and wild temperature changes. Let's start with dust. Oh, it looks harmless, right? But over time, fine particles settle into ports, buttons, and vents, and once that happens, it doesn't just look messy, it can actually interfere with how your device works. A little dust in the wrong place can cause short circuits, overheating, or total failure when you need it most. Then there's humidity. Most garages aren't climate controlled, which means when it's damp outside, it's damp inside too. That moisture creeps into devices and causes condensation. Ever opened up an old gadget only to find rust inside? That's what happens when metal parts sit in a humid environment for too long. Once corrosion sets in, it's almost impossible to fix without professional help. And during a crisis, that's not exactly an option. And don't even get me started on heat. Electronics don't do well in extreme temperatures. Lithium batteries, for example, degrade faster in the heat. So if you've stored backup batteries or solar chargers in your garage, guess what? They might not hold a charge anymore. Or worse, they could swell and become unsafe. Oh, and here's another sneaky problem. Pests. Rodents love chewing through wires. And not just the big ones. Even tiny USB cords or charging cables aren't off limits. One little nibble and suddenly your life-saving gadget is completely dead. Item number 7, firearms and ammo. All right, let's tackle something that a lot of preppers might not think twice about. Storing firearms and ammunition in the garage. If you're keeping your self-defense tools out there thinking they're safe and secure, I've got some hard truths for you. First off, let's talk about what happens to metal when it's exposed to the kind of conditions garages are known for, especially moisture. Firearms are made of metal. Metal plus humidity equals rust. And once rust starts creeping in, it doesn't just look bad because it affects performance. A gun that's been sitting in a damp garage can jam, misfire, or worse, become completely unsafe to use when you need it most. Now, let's add in temperature swings. Garages get hot, like hotter than you'd expect. That extreme heat can warp wooden grips, degrade polymer parts, and mess with internal mechanisms. Ammo isn't immune either. High temperatures can actually affect the stability of the propellant inside the cartridges. Translation, your rounds might not fire properly, or could even be dangerous to shoot. Item number 8, emergency blankets/clothing. Let's take a break from metal and chemicals and talk about something that seems totally harmless, your emergency blankets and spare survival clothing. You might think tossing them in the garage is no big deal, but if you do, you might be setting yourself up for a nasty surprise. Here's the thing, fabric doesn't last forever, especially not in a place like your garage. Whether it's a Mylar emergency blanket or a stack of warm sweaters, these items are super vulnerable to the kinds of conditions garages are known for, namely moisture, pests, and heat. Let's start with dampness. If your garage gets even slightly humid, and most do, that's bad news for fabric. Moisture leads to mold and mildew, which means your cozy blanket could turn into a stinky black spotted mess. And once that happens, there's no washing it out. In an emergency, you're not exactly going to have time to deep clean your gear. And there's the big one. Pests, rodents, moths, squirrels, they all love soft materials. Ever opened a storage bin only to find half your clothes chewed up or covered in droppings? That's not just gross, it's dangerous. Contaminated clothing can carry bacteria or cause allergic reactions, and ruined blankets are useless when you need warmth the most. And don't forget about sunlight. If your garage has windows or your gear sits where direct light hits it, UV rays can weaken fabric over time. That shiny mylar blanket might look fine on the outside, but after months of sun exposure, it could tear like tissue paper when you try to use it. Oh, and here's something most people overlook: smell. If your emergency clothes have been sitting in the garage near paint cans, fertilizer, or old tools, they probably absorbed some of those fumes. Not a big deal normally, until you're stuck wearing them for days and realize you smell like motor oil. So, where should you store your emergency blankets and clothing instead? Indoors, in sealed plastic bins with silica gel packs to absorb moisture. Keep them in a cool, dry place like a basement, closet, or under your bed, and every few months, open them up, air them out, and make sure everything's still in good shape. Pro tip: store emergency blankets and clothing indoors in sealed containers to protect them from moisture, pests, and odors. Item number 9, matches/lighters, flammable tools. Alright, we've made it to the final item, and this one might just light a fire under you. Pun absolutely intended. If you're storing matches, lighters, propane tanks, or any other flammable tools in your garage, you might literally be playing with fire. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's just a box of matches. What's the worst that could happen? But here's the truth. Flammable items are extremely sensitive to their environment, and the garage is basically a chemistry lab waiting to explode. Let's start with heat. Garages can get scorching hot, especially during summer, and when flammable materials like lighter fluid, aerosol cans, or even strike anywhere matches sit in high temperatures for too long, they become unstable. That means they can ignite more easily, sometimes from nothing more than a small spark or static charge. And speaking of sparks, have you ever flipped on a light switch and heard a little click? That tiny spark could be enough to set off fumes from stored flammables. 1 second you're grabbing your lawnmower, that's the next boom. Fire department's at your door, but it's not just about explosions. Even if nothing goes boom, storing these items improperly still puts you at risk. Lighters can leak, matches can degrade, propane tanks can corrode over time if exposed to moisture, and once these tools fail, they're useless when you need them most, like during a blackout or emergency evacuation. Here's another thing most people don't think about. Kids, if you've got curious hands around the house, a garage full of potentially dangerous items is like a playground with hazards hidden in plain sight. A single misplaced lighter or bottle of gasoline is all it takes for an accident to turn tragic. So, where should you store these items instead? The short answer: not in your garage. If you must keep flammable tools at home, store them in a cool, dry, well-ventilated area away from any ignition sources, and ideally in a locked cabinet or storage box. Only keep what you truly need and never mix fuels or chemicals together. This video was all about keeping your emergency supplies safe, useful, and ready when you need them most, because surviving a crisis is hard enough without your gear failing you. So stay smart, stay prepared, and above all, never trust your garage as a storage vault again. See you next time.